All right, guys, today we're going to be looking at a coolant leak on my Suburban 6.5-liter diesel. And I'm pretty sure it's going to end up with a water pump replacement, but I want to show you a couple of places you can check first. In the past, I've had leaks on these plastic tees that are, this particular vehicle has rear heating and air conditioning. And when these leak, it's pretty easy to see because you'll end up being able to see the leak coming down into either on top of or in the mounting flange area of the valve cover. It's not leaking there this time. The other place it leaks is this crossover fitting. Now, on the gasoline engines, this was a real problem because this particular fitting is made of kind of like a die-cast material, and over 8 years or so, 8 to 10 years, the Dexcool will eventually eat it up and it'll get corroded and break off, and usually starts leaking right back here on the side where it connects into the crossover pipe itself. So kind of like right in here if you take a look at it from this angle over on this side. Is typically it just starts leaking right on the bottom side of where I'm showing with this socket right here. On the diesels, they haven't redesigned it. They redesigned it on the gas to a steel zinc plated one that's a lot more durable. You can't use the gas one on diesels because it's a different inside diameter orifice, so you still have to basically replace it with the same design, and there's usually a kit you have to do to strip this out. So I'm happy to take some questions in the comments if you guys run into those two problems, but my problem is down here, dripping somewhere from either the oil pump itself or maybe even the backing plate that it mounts to. So we got to get some stuff out of the way to diagnose it further. So the first thing I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to remove this vehicle, diesel, it's got 2 batteries, so I'm going to be removing this connection cable to the batteries. These are real easy to get off, and you got to be real gentle with them too or they'll break. But you just get a small flathead screwdriver, and what you're going to do is you're going to stick this in here so that you can slide this guy to the side. And it pops off like that. I'll show you another one here. So you stick this guy in here, slide him to the side, and he pops off like that. All right, so I'm just trying to be gentle with these so they don't break. And then that's it for this. The second thing I'm going to do, kind of put him back here behind the oil fill for now, I'm going to need to get the shroud off. There are 3 10-millimeter bolts in the front here, and then there's going to be 1 on each side. So you sit down here, this guy way down here. So you're definitely going to need an extension. So I'm going to go ahead and take these off, and then we'll come back. All right, so we got these bolts out, and I did want to point out, I think in the previous segment, I mentioned the bolt here. I forgot to mention there's also a bolt in the back corner here where my finger is. So there's actually 2 on this inside on each of the sides of the fan shroud. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is I took the bulb out of the hood light because we're going to have the hood up for a long time here, and we don't want to run the battery down, either of them. So I take that bulb out and set it aside till I'm done. Okay, so with these bolts out now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this vent pipe for the front four-wheel drive axle, and it's got a slightly different clip on it. In fact, it's in the back here, so hopefully you can see. It's the same kind of a deal with a flathead screwdriver. You just kind of unclip it. And again, we just don't want to damage anything. And I'm just going to drape this over this battery cable for now. And that should permit me to remove the fan shroud. Okay, so we got this side out, and just got it cleared out of the way. Okay, we got the fan shroud out of the way. Just going to set it aside for a moment. And now with the fan shroud out of the way, we have a little bit better visibility down here. So, I can tell now for sure that, we talked about this crossover quick connect link being sometimes a culprit for leaking, and not this case. The next thing I would be looking for is, do I have leaks on this top pipe that connects the crossover to the water pump? I can see everything's nice and bone dry around here, so that's also not my problem. So I'm going to have to go further. With this out of the way, the fan shroud out of the way, I can at least also go down here and get a look at the radiator. And I already went under the vehicle. I didn't see anything on the bottom, but also don't see anything pooling here either. Nor do I see anything going on with these top hoses of the radiator. So I'm also thinking it's not coming from the radiator either, which is continuing to reinforce my thought that we have a water pump problem. So the next thing we're going to need to do to get another degree of visibility is get this, this fan off. So I'm going to get some tools to do that, and that's the next thing we'll do is we'll remove the fan from the front of the water pump. Guys, we're going to get this fan off next. What I've done in between the other two videos is I've kind of turned the pulley so I can get these holes lined up here. You'll notice there's a couple of holes on each side. There's one here, there's one here. Turn this fan blade a little bit. Hopefully you can see there's one here and one down there. And the purpose of those holes, what the dealer had, is a tool like this. And this tool has a number of pins that fit in the holes in the pulley to hold it stable. And this is a tool I have. It's a Chevy 61500B. It's a USA-made tool. It's not the exact same brand Kentmore type tool that the dealer had, but it's a kind of a clone copy of it. And it does the job. If you don't have a tool like this, you can borrow one probably from your local auto parts store or rent it. So we're going to put this guy into those holes. So you can see two are wider apart than the other, so it only goes one way. That's why I turned the pulley when we had the video break. And then once you get this guy in, all four of those in, he'll just sit like that. Now, that'll give us our position to hold this. Now we're going to need to get onto this nut down here, and we're going to need to turn him left loosey on this particular style truck. For that, I'm going to use this big Harbor Freight Pittsburgh steel crescent wrench. These aren't too expensive. They look pretty cool if you're going to walking down the street with them, but it does the job. It gives you a lot of leverage. If you don't have something like this and you have something smaller, you may have to use a hammer and get a few hammer blows to break the torque on this nut. Let's get this guy into position down here. What I'm trying to do is just kind of go back and not damage the fan blades and get this into position. So this hasn't been moved in a long time. So it's going to be a two-handed job for two people. So I got a helper over here who's going to hold this tool. And then I'm going on the driver's side, and I'm going to get over here on the passenger side and pull it. And this should pop right loose. There we go. All right. Now with the right tools, it's really not that bad. I'll take these guys out of the way, and then we should be able to just spin that guy right off. Yep. With our hand. When you see him getting part way, you can kind of hold on to him so he doesn't drop into the radiator and damage the radiator fins. But this whole clutch fan assembly just screws right off. Just a little bit further here. There we go. Take this out, set it aside. And then the next thing we're going to do is remove the serpentine belt. And to do that, I'm just going to use a standard crowbar. I'm going to take just a standard crowbar, and I'm going to take an extra nitrile glove. I'm just going to kind of put it on the end here. I'm going to put this guy right in between the idler pulley. I'm going to pull it to the left. Whoops. Whoops, whoops, whoops. But it's better to have a whoops than to scratch that pulley. Put it like this, give me a little bit more leverage. There we go. Pop that guy off. And then with that out of the way, we can unwind this pulley. The next thing we're going to have to do this guy down here is our vacuum pump. So we can finally get to the point of starting to remove some of these things. To get this guy off, there are two 13 millimeter bolts behind, which you can't get to them with the vacuum pump pulley installed. So you're going to have to pull the pulley off the shaft of the pump with a pulley remover. So let me go get my pulley remover and we'll show that procedure. All right, guys, I've got my my pulley puller installed on the vacuum pump pulley. And basically, I'll show you how this guy goes on right after we get it off. But what I like to do is take a crescent wrench that's going to hit this, is give me some leverage here, and then take a 13mm socket, and you can just get in here and crank it down. And as you crank it down, it's going to force that pulley off the pump. It's going to take a bit, but this is the tool to do the job. This same tool, I got this at Harbor Freight, this same tool
I didn't get that.
is going to put it back on as well. I just noticed my watch had activated here. All right. About halfway. You guys can speed up through this if you like. Just about. All right. Not quite. There we go. Maybe. Nope, just slipped. False alarm. Probably should have got a larger crescent wrench here. It would give me some more leverage, but almost at the end. I can see it from behind. Go, and the pulley is off the pump. So the way this guy works, they're all pretty much the same, I think. You've got this sleeve, and then you've got these collar fittings that fit on, and one of them is going to grab the grooves of the pulley, and the other is going to grab this flange piece. And as you tighten it, this bolt, it's going to push against the shaft of the pump and then work this back, pulling the pulley with it. Pretty simple and effective. Right tools for the job. All right, next thing we're going to do to get this pump off is just going to take our 13 and we're going to take these guys off. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them with this wrench. Might need to have a little bit more torque, but nope, there they go. Okay. There's this bolt, and then there's one more bolt on this side here. There we go. All right. And when this guy comes loose, we're going to need to disconnect the vacuum line that goes to the wastegate solenoid. So I'm going to kind of hold the pump as I remove this last bolt. I think that's the last bolt. Oh, nope. One more here. Sorry about that. Didn't catch that one. There he goes. Now he's getting loose. Take this bolt off. And again, these are all 13mm. And now we should be able to reach your hand back here and disconnect the vacuum line. Okay. So there's the connection right there that I just pulled. And then you can see there's the line right here, right there. All right, so we got the vacuum pump off. And I'll pause this now before we go on to the next step. All right, guys, with this with this vacuum pump off, I can finally get a look at where I think the leak's been happening. And, you know, sure enough, if I push along the edge of the hose, and take this, paper towel here, and I just give it like a push around here, I can see that it's wet. So I guess what I've got going on here is some kind of corrosion between the hose and the nipple on the water pump. So as I scrape this out, you can see there's just a lot of wetness and corroded pieces, which is probably going to mean this is the source of the leak, either right in here or right behind here. So I'm satisfied that we're in the right area, and if we're going to have to take this pump off, there's going to be more work to do. So the next thing we're going to do is up on top here. We're going to need to remove these pieces that hold down the air conditioner compressor. So if we bring our attention back up to the top, that's going to mean starting with this 13 millimeter nut. This guy's holding down a little piece of the air intake. I never have really known what this guy is. Some sort of probably moisture capture unit or something. But this guy's going to come off so that we can get this clamp over here. That's what we're really after. And then we're going to have to take off these 4 bolts that are holding the air conditioning compressor on. And I might have to go get my bigger wrench. Oh, there he goes. All right. One of the few things I still let the dealer work on is the air conditioning, because I don't have the equipment, obviously, to do the Freon or the R134. And these guys never put these things back on to proper torque specifications. So it was a pain in the ass to get off. All right, this guy and this guy. We got 2 more on the other side. Now, all we're going to do with this compressor after we get it unhooked here, we're going to disconnect the 3 electrical connections, and then we're just going to kind of fold it over. Make 2 more bolts. One more bolt. Should have got a longer extension with a different size socket wrench, but we may do with this. I apologize for the huge overflowing jet here. All right, pop out our high pressure switch. In the back, actually 2 pressure switches. And then we got our clutch connection in the front here. Might be able to get off without a screwdriver, or might not. No. All right, we'll pop that guy off, and then that will allow us to move him out of the way. Go ahead and take this back down for a moment. Okay. All right. This guy comes up. We'll just leave this kind of rubber grommet piece on here. And then at the bottom is another one holding this piece of aluminum on. And we'll take this off as well. Also, all 13. So, there's not a whole lot of tools that you have to do this, fortunately. A lot of common size fasteners. And the reason we're going to take this guy off is, in order to get this water pump off, we're going to have to take this accessory bracket off that's holding this alternator and the tensioner. This particular vehicle's got 2 alternators, dual alternators from the factory. But we only need to take off the bracket itself. We're going to disconnect the alternator after this, but we will take a pause break in between those two. All right. Got our stud off here. All right, so now with everything out of the way, what we're going to very carefully do, because I've always had trouble with this guy leaking, is we're going to try to just fold him up and out of the way. I think what I end up having to do is I'm going to have to bungee him up and out of the way here. So I'm going to go get some bungee cords, come back, and we'll do that. All right, what I've done here, guys, I've gently bungeed this piece to the air intake out because I don't want to put any stress on this old rubber. So I've just kind of gently bungeed him out. I've taken this hose from the radiator, and I've taken these two lines that go to the air conditioning system, to the compressor, and I've got them bungeed over to the hood hinge because I'm trying just to get them out of the way where I can work with the alternator. And then I've got the compressor itself just kind of gently pulled back here and bungeed up over by the master cylinder just to get it out of the way. You know, again, I said, you know, I've had a lot of trouble with this leaking until I finally found an NOS hose assembly some time ago and had the dealer throw that on. So I definitely don't want to cause that problem again. All right, so to get the alternator off, again, it's our friendly 13 millimeter. So we've got a couple of fasteners, one here at the top, and then this guy down here. Whoops. And with these two guys out, I'll be able to get behind. And what I'm going to have to do here now, before I finish, I'm going to have to disconnect the positive power on the battery so that I can get back here and disconnect the connection to the alternator and remove it. I'm going to try just leaving the idler pulley on here, rather the tensioner, and see if I can get this accessory bracket off with just removing the alternator. These guys have got a long thread on them, so you just got to be patient. There's the first one. This guy's just kind of stuck down here. There's always somebody that doesn't want to cooperate. But with the right tools, you can force everybody to cooperate. Okay. All right, so I got to get a small crowbar. We'll come back in here, use a small crowbar and prise this out. But like I said, first we'll come back. I'm going to disconnect the positive battery and disconnect the back of the alternator. Then we'll prise and remove them out. And then the next thing we'll go after is this accessory bracket. And if I'm right, that should be the last thing in our way, because this will be this bolt here, this nut rather, that's a stud on one of the bolts that's holding the water pump on. Very similar to this one. It's like a bolt that's got a threaded stud on the end of it. We should be able to remove this assembly. Now before we do that, of course, we're going to drop this hose and drain out this coolant. Try to catch as much of it as we can so we can take it to the recycling center. So we'll take a break here and we'll come back. I guess before I close this video out, now all this stuff out of the way, I can give you a really good shot of this quick connect coupler that was a source of some leaks in the past that I was talking about earlier. With all this stuff out of the way, you can see this guy and how he fits into the crossover here. Anyway, so take a break and we'll come back and continue on next time. All right, let's continue on with this. Like I said, I'm going to take off the battery connections now so that I can get the alternators. I just don't want to have these connected in case I accidentally slip disconnecting things on the alternator. Now this guy, I stick a little glove in here because on this dual battery one, it's just a really bad design in my opinion, because the positive terminal is right next to this bracket. I'm just going to use this 5/16 battery terminal to disconnect these guys. And I'm going to do both sides, of course. And then what I'm going to do, just to keep him from getting into trouble till I'm done, kind of slip a little bag over him. And I go over and do the other side. Same kind of thing. then we'll take the alternator off. Since we already got the bolts off, we're just going to prise it off the accessory bracket, and then we will remove the accessory bracket itself. And that should be the last thing on the passenger side attached to the engine anyway. All right, get this guy off. Gonna put a little bag around him too. I'm gonna rubber band him here in a minute, but not right now. Okay. Now we're going to draw our attention over here. I'm going to take just a small crowbar, prise bar, whatever you want to call it, with the bolts out. It's not too hard to get it to let go. At least it shouldn't be. There it goes. With this guy out. Now we don't have to worry about the battery being connected. Pulling forward to where I can disconnect this nut. I have to get my, looks like he's a 13. And we'll take that guy off of there as soon as I can see what I got here. I think it's a 13. Nope. Probably a 15. Sorry about that, guys. I guess it's just the little rubber housings kind of in the way here. The insulator. Was a 13 after all. So I'm just going to keep this disconnected. Come down here. Take this off. Put this back on here so we don't lose it. And then all we got left on the alternator is this little sensing harness connector on the bottom. And I'll take this and set it aside. Somebody driving by here. All right. So these guys are 15s that are holding the accessory bracket on. So we're going to take these two on the bottom off first. There's one here, and there's one here. And then there's also one right in this crevice here. That's going to be the harder one. Let's get these off first. Not too bad to get these off. I think fortunately, just because for once, oil leaking is working in my favor. Keeping these guys from getting too corroded. It's actually my biggest concern when we get to actually pulling the pump is how corroded the bolts are. The last thing I want to have happen on this project is have something break off inside. All right, got these two nuts off. Whoops. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so like I said, there's one that's right in behind here. You can see it if you come over on this side. You can see where my finger is. There's just an opening in here, and there's another nut in there. And I think that one's a different size. Not sure, though. But I am going to check right now. Let's see if it's a 13. And it does feel like a 13. But I'm going to use the bigger wrench with an adapter. So you can do this, as you can see, without having to pull the tensioner. Just one less thing to have to fool with. I can get this guy off without him dropping. We'll be done with this step. Okay, there he is. 13 millimeter bolt. Okay, I think that's all it's holding this guy on. Nope, one more over here. Another 13. And that's all it's holding him on, because I see him loosening up now. I have not actually changed the water pump in one of these diesels before. I've done it a few times on a gas truck, but not on a diesel. This is a lot of work. So certainly while I'm in here, we're going to check lots of other things to see if anything else needs attention while we're in here. All right. Now this guy should come off. There he goes. All right, so now we take this whole accessory bracket off. And we have a lot better view down here now. And we can see if there's any additional damage that's visible with this out of the way. So you can still kind of see what we were looking at yesterday. I'm just going to kind of take, and here, by the way, you can see this is the guy that goes to the vacuum pump. You can see at one point I made an adapter on this when there was some damage at the end of the rigid factory fitting. So that's what you're seeing there. Kind of taking a look back here, just on the back side of this hose. And you know, it's still the same kind of corrosion around the seam that we were seeing on the front. I don't know if you guys can see if we swing the camera around here. It's really hard with the not a lot of light. I'll try to get some more light in here and bring it up. It's one of those kind of situations where it's middle of the day here, but there's not a lot of light getting into the engine bay. All right, so at this point, right, the next thing we're going to end up having to do is this water pump attaches with, you see 2 bolts here, and then it's mounted to this plate. So this plate's got some bolts that go around it too. The next thing we're going to take off is this oil filler tube and get that out of the way. And we probably might be able to leave it on, but I think I'm just going to take it off just to get it out of the way. And then we've got these mounting bolts over here, and then there are a few on the bottom. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and take this clamp off, and we'll go ahead and start getting this pipe off to start draining the coolant out. And then we'll remove this pipe, and then we'll be able to pull the pump and the plate assembly off. So let's take a pause here, and we'll come back. All right, so I'm going to turn this halogen light on for you guys. Hopefully allow you to see a little better. And you know, I'm showing my glove here, right? It's all nice and dry. And while I can't get a good view of the mirror, if I stick it back behind here and just grab the back of the water pump, you can see it's soaking with antifreeze. And the other thing, you know, so this side's nice and dry as well. If I go up under the water pump, you know, reaching out towards where the weep hole would be, same deal. So I'm convinced the water pump is at least one of our problems. And whenever you change the pump, I like to replace the lower hose. Again, this is all original stuff, 20 years old. So I'm going to end up replacing the pump, the hose, and the fasteners on both ends. So at this point, you know, I'm satisfied that I've got the right problem, at least the primary problem. It's not to say there might be something else that we can't see underneath where it might be leaking with the seal of how it attaches, but we're seeing enough now to know that it's okay to disturb this. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is taking off this old rusty clamp. And since I'm not going to salvage this hose, don't really care if I damage it, but I am going to try to keep it somewhat intact because I'd like to use this to help direct the fluid into the pan I've got sitting at the bottom, if I can. So, got this guy off. He hasn't budged since 1999. and to get him past the end of the water pump's nipple, which you can feel is right about there. It's about that far. All right, and then this will be the actual hard part, is getting it to let go. And if I can't get it to let go, we'll just cut it. But we'll try to do it this way first so that we can use the hose to help direct where we want the coolant to drain out to. And the hose itself, you know, hasn't like broke or anything, but I'm sure it's just weakened and gotten loose. See the stuff coming up right there. Just trying to break the seal before I try to actually prise it off. And then I won't have you guys necessarily watch all that. Nothing exciting to see there. All right, let me see if I can get to it with my hand. Almost. And what I do is I got an 8-quart pan down here, and you've seen maybe in some of my other videos when I change out transmission fluid, I also use a little aluminum oven kind of roasting pan with a slit cut in the middle of it, just to make it a little bit of a wider catch area. And I got that sitting over on top of it. And the game plan here is just to get that about full part way, and then be able to use this hose to lift it up and cut off the flow. And then we can empty it out and do it again. It's almost loose, it's just, there we go. All right. And for all you environmentalists out there, we're doing what we can to catch this, but I am more interested in getting the truck back on the road. All right. So let that go for a little bit, and we'll come back. We'll pick it up from there. All right, let's go ahead and get this guy off, guys. I'm going to do some wire. I've been doing some wire brushing. I'm going to do a little bit more here before we start. The idea here is just to get some crud, loose paint, corrosion as best we can away from the seam that we're going to be separating, just to try and keep that crud from falling in behind here when we get to the point of actually pulling it off. So next things we're going to be doing is removing this hose, this bypass hose. And the reason I'm doing all this scraping now is to hopefully get some of that washed away with the coolant that comes out when we remove that piece. Now, in actually removing this, I was mentioning to you before, the pump on these diesels is attached to a plate. So you can see here's the pump, kind of the outline here, you can kind of see it. And there's 2 stud bolts attaching it here. They actually penetrate somewhat into the cooling area. There's a bolt here, there's another stud bolt, and there's 3 bolts under here. You only see 1, but there's 2 more over here. And then the plate is attached with these 2 bolts here, these 2 stud bolts that are securing this oil filler, and then there's 2 more bolts back here that we won't get a good look at until we get this pipe out of this hose rather out of the way. And the pump then has additional bolts coming in from the other side that secure it to the top of the, to the other side of the backing plate. All right, guys, unfortunately, the camera ran out of storage before, and I missed a section, so I'm going to have to kind of show you where I left off. But where I was about to go right after it died, and I didn't realize that it had run out, it's going to go to this page in the service manual just to give you an idea about what I was talking about. So here's a graphic of the water pump for a diesel attached to that backing plate. And we can see there's 2 bolts on either side of the backing plate, plus 2 stud bolts at the top, which is what the nuts go on to hold the oil filler pipe. And then on the water pump itself, we can see there's 2 stud bolts on the passenger side, 1 stud bolt, and a bolt on the driver's side, and then 3 more bolts at the bottom. So that's the the layout of this guy. Now what ended up actually happening, ran out of space when I was working on this, and I was in the process of removing the overflow pipe here before we realized that it got done. But you know, you take these clamps off, and then I just took just an X-Acto knife and just very carefully went around it, because I'm going to replace this. You know, this is a 20-year-old hose. I'm not going to keep this. I'm not going to keep these fasteners. And that was where we left off. So I was in the process before the problem happened of getting ready to. I was hoping that we would have some coolant come out of here to help wash some of this debris off, but we didn't. So I was in the process of starting to just get it off manually, since I did not get the coolant wash I was after, which I guess in the grand scheme of things is probably okay, because it'll give us a better view of the bottom of the pump when we get it off and what kind of coolant leakage we've got going on there. All right, so now we find out, this is actually the hardest part. Now we find out if we have a lot of trouble or we don't have a lot of trouble in terms of having anything that's going to be broken or corroded off when we try to remove it. So this guy will be the last of our relatively easy things. Get these nuts off that are holding this oil filler pipe. For some reason this guy is really tight. Anyways, we'll take the two nuts off, and that'll let us remove the bracket. And then the pipe is so old, it should come right off. I don't know why it's not hand spinnable, but I guess there's just some crud and stuff on the threads. So we have to do it the long ratchet way. All right, there he is. Just cannot get it finger loosen rather. Okay, got that guy. We'll take the other one off. This guy's not as bad. He's coming off of my finger. Still a little rough near the end. And then what I'll do before we actually pull this is we'll stick something in there to keep crud from ending up inside the oil intake where this pipe inserted into the rubber grommet. Almost. Here we go. Just gonna have to ratchet it all the way off. There it is. Okay. All right, and then this guy, like I said, it's just a rubber grommet that it goes under here. Almost in this video. Okay, we are gonna get all this away from the outer edge. And then we'll get a clean rag to stick in there. Just a second here while I get another rag. And I guess I can give you a pro tip too. As I was getting this thing out, the top of this radiator, this aluminum radiator here, can get pretty sharp. Nice little bleeding scuff I got out of that. Usually it's the knuckles. All right, let's continue on with the main event here. So now that we have that out of the way, we can get a little bit of this crud away from these guys as well. Now we can start trying to loosen these up. That one's going to be okay. 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 All right, so yeah, these top backing plate bolts are all going to come off very nicely. This one, last one down here of the 6. Comes off just fine. All right, so you guys don't need to watch me extract these bolts. I'm going to go ahead and take these out. We'll come back and we'll get the water pump ones rather, and I'll get something on my little scratch here. All right, guys, at this point, I've gotten most all these bolts off. Just going to kind of recap, show you where we're at, right? Obviously, plug this up when we took off the oil filler pipe, and we plugged this up just again to keep debris out of these places, like we talked about down here with the lower hose and the vacuum pipe. So we took off these 13 millimeter bolts that we talked about. These 2 on this side, they're just regular bolts. The 2 on this side, and then the 2 that are threaded studs that have the nuts that hold the pipe on. Those came off pretty straightforward. So where we left it off, I was taking those off. I also proceeded to take out these 15 millimeter ones. So the 2 on this side, and then the 2 on this side. Didn't have any trouble really with those. I'll show you in a minute though. The one that was here was pretty corroded, so I'm going to probably end up having to replace the bolt. And then I started down here. There was a 15 millimeter bolt here. So all I have left is there's a couple of 10 millimeter bolts, and it's possible to get them with the pulley here. Obviously you're going to have to. And let's see if I can get you a view of them. So let's see if I can get it in the view. Okay, so there's one, if you can see in the mirror. There's one of these 10 millimeter bolts right there. And then the other one is on this side. And he's right there. Alright, so we'll take those 2 guys out. And that's all that's left holding this stuff on. I already loosened them before I started this. You can see up here, our whole assembly's coming loose, which is nice. It means I won't have to beat it with a hammer. Get it off. At the same time, though, it means it's going to be kind of awkward to hold it into position. But yeah, this whole thing is going to come off as one unit. The pump and the pulley is all one unit, and then it's attached to this steel backing plate. It's all one unit. Maybe I can get this bolt without dropping it. Get myself a little stool here so that I can reach over and get that guy. And then we'll take the last one out. We can finally remove it. So a lot of work to get to this point. It's just a little bit still on there. Always is, right? How long these are until I get them out. Can't imagine they're that long though. Of course, it might be. Let's see if we can get something in here to go a little faster now. Get this guy off of here. the flange. So I'll have to just wait till I pull the whole thing out to get him. And let's see if I can get this last guy over here. This one comes in at a little bit of an angle. Hard to see. Just got to be patient. And there we go. All right, so this is the little guy that we were after here, 10 millimeter. The other one is hopefully still sitting in here. If not, he might have fell down. There he is. Okay. There's the other one. All right, let me take this whole unit out. We can see, if we look on the other side here, we can see these are the bolts I was mentioning that are on the opposite side of the plate that are attaching it to the water pump. And so we'll be taking these off next to separate the water pump from this plate. All right, set this guy aside. I'll show you something with these bolts up here that you see on the top of the radiator. And these are the 15s I was talking about, and I'm basically just, I put them all in their own little containers because I want to put them back exactly where they went. But this is the guy that I was saying was, of all of them, this was the one that had the surface corrosion. And he's not that bad. You could probably wire brush him, but whenever something starts getting corroded like this, I don't know if it's been weakened, so it's cheap enough, you know, $2-3 to replace it and swap it out. So these are all the bolts individually labeled. So now you can see here what we've got is the timing gears of the diesel, and this is why we took that time to brush all that debris out of the way so we didn't get any of that shit inside the engine. So what I'm going to do now is get a couple of clean blue paper towels. I'm going to plug up these two coolant entry points into the engine where the water pump hooks up. Get some of this crud that you see on here. Looks leftover gasket material. It looks like a little bit of leftover sealant from where this bolt went in here, for example. Get all this stuff cleaned out. Put some clean rags to cover up these timing gears, and then we'll come back, we'll look at that, and then we'll look at taking apart the water pump from the backing plate. All right, guys, I've got this kind of buttoned up until we get ready to reassemble. What I've gone through is just going to quick cleaning with a pipe cleaner here onto some of these straight through threads. I'll go through it again when I get ready to reassemble it. And then I've just done a gasket scraper, real cursory over here. And see, the idea here is keep this draped over, and you can work with it down near the bottom. You want to keep it where nothing's going to go find its way back inside there. And then I've cleaned inside each of these holes. You know, just got a little scraper here and scraped out some of the sealant from last time, and then stuck some holes in here. So everything's pretty dry except for this one down here. Still going to drip a little bit, and we'll let him go and change them out later. So let's go ahead and take a look at the pump and the backing plate assembly and keep going to the next disassembled piece on that. So I've got this guy sitting over here, and we're going to take these 13 millimeter bolts on the backing plate out. Get them loosened up by hand. And hopefully can just yank them out faster with the electric ratchet. And this should be the last piece of disassembly we have on this guy. And we can start going in the other direction. One more. Okay. So that, you can see right around here the edge. This is the anaerobic sealant that GM uses to make the waterproof seal when you put this guy back on. Now, we should be able to get this plate off. That I'm probably going to go need to get a hammer. Nope, I guess not. It wasn't as hard stuck as I thought it would be. All right, and that's it. There's our pump, all separated out finally after all this work. I went ahead and cut this guy here. I'm going to go ahead and get him off. Actually, I need to get a screwdriver, finish getting him off. Unfortunately, they don't do any core charges for these. They used to. They don't anymore. So we get back to doing the assembly. I'll show you the new pump. I picked up an AC Delco pump, and I actually picked this one up from Rock Auto. They still make these parts, GM does, so you can get one that's brand new. Doesn't have to be NOS or anything like that. That's it. So we'll pick it up again with the reassembly piece. So, we're going to end it with a new water pump, a new lower hose. I'll actually show, I guess, before we get started, I'll show getting the lower hose and the lower shroud area out of the way so we can do that. But we end up with 2 clamps on there, a new crossover pipe, 2 clamps on there, all new sealant on the bolts as well as on the backing plate. I'm going to go get this backing plate all cleaned up as well. So we'll pick it up after that. All right, last thing we're going to remove, like I said, is this lower hose. Now what I've done in between videos here is I've routed it underneath this cross member so that I could get the last of the antifreeze out. So when I drop this, we don't get a big mess. So I think I've gotten everything out by doing that. There's 2 connections we're going to remove here. So here's the hose coming from the overflow tank or the fill tank, whatever you want to call it. Surge tank, a lot of different names, and it's got a single spring clamp right here. We're going to remove this spring clamp and we're going to take this hose off. We're going to be very gentle with this hose because we're not replacing it, but we are going to replace this clamp when we go put it back together with the new hose. And then after I get that one off, over here by the radiator, you can see down in this area is another large spring clamp, and we're going to need to take that guy off and then we can get the hose off. All right, so let's start with the smaller one, because that's going to probably be the easier of the 2. And just get my pliers in the right spot, get this battery cable pushed back. And then we just want to walk it back. All right, now we got the guy off. I'm going to get another tool here to try and loosen this guy up without damaging him. I got a couple of tools I'm going to try. This first one is just a plier that has nylon teeth on it so that it doesn't cut into the rubber. Let's see if I can get it off with this. And then after that, I got a different pair of pliers we'll try for the other thing. Gonna move this light a little bit so it's not right on me. Just not a lot of room to work, and I was going to try without removing the lower fan shroud first. I might not be able to get around doing that though because I don't have a lot of room. Nope, no room to twist it, so we're going to have to take this lower fan shroud off. This guy's held in by, looks like there's one bolt here and another one there, and we'll probably have to come in from underneath the access area. So let's go do that and get that out of the way. There's a couple of 15mm bolts that hold it on. There's one. And there's 2. Okay, with this guy down, flashlight here. should see there's a bolt here, and there's one there. It looks like it might be a 10. I don't know. I'm going to go see what size that is. We'll come back and we'll start taking these two bolts off so we can remove this lower fan. All right, this does turn out to be a 10, guys, and I had to get a really small socket and wrench to fit in here. Of course, this is our lower hose that we pushed down here that we saw from above in the earlier shot. Just going to get this guy off, and you're going to have all kinds of debris, no doubt, falling. So I'm sitting not directly underneath it. I'm sitting over to the left of it, just to make sure I don't have any of that stuff fall on me. Dust, dirt, little rocks. Who knows? All right, so this guy's pretty long. I think he's almost out, though. So we'll get this guy out, and we'll get the one over on the other side. I won't necessarily film all of that because you guys can experience it for yourselves. All right, so there he is. Nothing special. Actually, looks like the exact same type that was holding the upper shroud. No surprise. Okay, so get my wrench back here. My socket back on. And then we've got this guy on this side. All right, so to get this guy off, he's a little bit harder. I'm probably going to have to come in here with a flexible elbow and come in from this side. So let me go do that. All right, guys, this little 10mm bolt turned out to be a real problem. I could not find any angle that I could get a socket on it, even with an elbow. So I'm actually just having to use a box end wrench here. And I just show you real quick that it is going to super go slow, but I don't see any other way to get it off. So a couple of twists on each one is what I've been doing here. I say it's probably going to take about 10 minutes or so just to get this one bolt off. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but I just wanted to show you what I ended up having to do technique-wise. The problem with trying to do an elbow is, of course, the steering gear's in the way. And if not the steering gear, then you got these lines that are in the way here, these coolant lines. So there's no way to get anything in here but one of these. So I'm going to keep working this guy off. As soon as he's off, though, we'll be able to take this lower shroud off. All right, all that work. Let's get this guy out now. Just kind of lift straight out. Just make sure you don't damage any of the radiator little fins. Let's set this guy aside. And now we'll see if we can get that hose off. So we already got the spring clamp out of the way. And now that we can actually get this battery cable. Now we can get this guy off. Now we can go get this guy off over here. At least we can get the spring clamp off. The hose is going to be another story. Just a little bit smaller. There's just no room at all here. At least what goes on here, they don't do these, or they don't spec these spring clamps for this position anymore. It's just a standard worm gear, like the one that came off the water pump end. We can just get a good grip on it. We'll be able to get it off. Yeah, I'm going to get a second little tool here to help me. It's getting kind of caught going at an angle here. I think when I give it a squeeze, if I have a little screwdriver to help me work it off. That might do it. That's the problem, is you just have no room at all to open up the pliers and get it on here. The dealer, I think, I just don't have this particular tool. They had a way to get these spring clamps off with a special tool, so it's not as hard for them. All right, we got that out of the way. And now the super pain thing is, can we get this guy off without damaging anything? We don't want to get a leak in the radiator on top of the other leak we're in here to fix. All right, we lucked out so much here. All right, that's it for the hose. All right, now let's start putting stuff back together. I'm going to turn this light off because it's getting super hot. The first thing we're going to do is we'll put the water pump back on the backing plate. So let me get set up for that. And I'm going to set that out here, and then we'll show that piece. All right, guys, let's start reassembling things now that we get everything off, just to kind of finalize on the original problem here. The leak was coming from the weep hole of the old water pump, but that wasn't the only place. In hindsight, what I've realized is it was also running down and getting onto the pipe, so rather than it coming from the pipe up, although I'm sure there was a little bit of that given all this corrosion, it also is working its way down. There's a lot of corrosion around the bolt holes, especially here, and here. And so I also think what had happened is that the whole seal here had failed. So multiple sources of leaks that hopefully this whole operation here is going to solve. So I've got a new pump here. This is, like I said, this was a 6.5 liter turbocharged diesel in a 99, and that's a different pump than the pre-97 series, so 97, 98, 99. Get this pump here, 191-68609. This is actually a superseded number, so I'll go ahead and I'll roll the original number at the bottom as well as this number here. This is the number you're more likely to get than the one that's discontinued. There's a gasket included inside, although in my experience, these things, sometimes get damaged, and this one I'm not really confident about, so I thought ahead and came prepared, and knowing that would probably be a problem, I also bought a gasket that's nice and flat. Part number 12553488 for this particular series. And then let's take a look at our actual pump. One of the things we're going to have to do after we get it mounted, I'll show you, we're going to have some cosmetic work we're going to have to do, but this is our basic pump. It'll come with the pulley installed. There's a little thread protector here for the fan nut. We'll go ahead and leave that alone. And we can see here the casting number, 19168. Looks like 809, and I believe that is exactly the same as what's on the main part number. So that's good. Sometimes they're different. All right, so this guy we're going to then put on the old backing plate. But we're just kind of make sure, that it looks exactly the same on the mounting side, and I'm satisfied that it does look the same. Now there is two pumps that you'll see specified for this 99 series. There's also something, if on your glove box sticker you have an option called ZK3, which is a pull-ahead design. It means you might have gotten an early cut of the year 2000 6.5 that was used to some of the new body style trucks. And that's actually a different pump, but that is not the case here. So now we're going to take our backing plate. So I took my backing plate and I got the kind of like fossilized gasket off from the original and cleaned this up. And I also took some of this corrosion that we was talking about between this bolt hole and this bolt hole. This is cosmetic, but you never know because it's right along the edge. So I just wanted to clean it up a little bit. Same with over here. There was also some heavy corrosion in the area of the coolant flow that I cleaned up here. And then on the back, I cleaned up the old seal that covers up the injection pump timing gears and the timing chain, that area we saw earlier in the video. I didn't want to do a lot here, so I just used a wire brush on a drill on low speed. So I didn't get all of this off. This original sealant was kind of like a shellac from the factory. We're going to follow the service manual guidelines and use an anaerobic sealant to seal it up here. All right, so pretty straightforward. We're going to put the gasket on the pump, and then we're going to put the assembly on the backing plate, and then we're going to put our screws that go along the back side, and we're going to torque them down to 17 foot-pounds, yeah, 23 Newton meters. I'm just looking over here at what I got my guy set for. And then we'll tighten it up. And then what I'm going to do, I'm not going to actually show this, but I'm going to repaint this when we get it in here, just cosmetics, because a lot of the paint was chipping off anyway, and some of this rust. I might even wire wheel down a little bit more before I put a final coat of paint on it. Just, you already got it off, so why not? Okay, so let's get started. So I am going to take my nice and flat gasket. When you open these kind of paper gaskets, you want to be super careful that you don't damage them. And I'm going to take this guy out, and I'm going to make sure that he is looking correct. Trying to find the right orientation. It's like this. Okay. And then to hold him in place, I'm just going to use a very thin. I'm actually just, because I'm sure that the factory guys probably have a little bit of a lubricant on here. So I'm just going to make sure that we got all that wiped off. And then I'm going to use some anaerobic sealant, which is what we're going to actually use on the back side. But I'm going to use a little bit of it on the front side here just to tacky up and hold our gasket. Just a thin smear all the way around. And you wouldn't see this specified in the service manual. And the only reason I'm doing it is this is a really old backing plate, 20 years old. It does have some surface corrosion, although nothing that would make me think that it's not serviceable. But there's enough there that I just like to put a little bit of this stuff on to make sure I don't get any small leaks. Now what I'm doing here is not for that reason. I'm doing this part just to kind of hold the gasket in place. But I'm also going to put this on the backing plate in just a minute. You'll see that. And that's what I was referring to, that is really functional in nature, what I'm trying to do there. And again, I'm using the anaerobic type of sealant because that's what is specified for the back side. And so I've got it in my hand, so why not? All right, so I've got enough on here to do what we want to do for tackiness. And then we'll be able just to set our gasket into position and have him stay put. You know what? He managed to move on me, as they always do, right? We can play guess which way the gasket goes. All right. So now I can get this into position, and this is just enough on here to keep this in place until I'm ready to flip it over and get ready to bolt it on. Okay? So just kind of get them as good as I can. And again, I'm just trying to do a double check to make sure that everything lines up, and I'm satisfied with that. All right, so now let's come over here to the backing plate side. And similarly, I'm going to put this stuff on all along this side of the gasket to deal with what I think could be a problem here. Again, it's just a very thin smear. If you're going to put more than that on, you don't need to use a gasket, right? But this is what you have to do in terms of using a gasket. The other side, GM doesn't specify a gasket. Felpro makes one. I think maybe at least one other company makes one. I can't remember the name right off the top of my head. But GM just has this particular anaerobic material as the only thing they specify that you need to use. And that's all we're going to do for the other side. Probably should put a little bit more on the other side here, but I don't want to do that. Again, I said the only reason I'm doing this is because I know this old backing plate has probably got some corrosion that's going to lead to problems. And I don't want to take this all apart again. So you guys saw, this is a big deal on these diesels to do this job. It's an all-day job just to get it disassembled and put back together again. It's going to be, I actually spent a couple of days on this as a weekend job for me, just because I'm doing some of this filming, and I'm also going to do this kind of cosmetic work, getting off some of the rust and repainting and stuff like that. But changing out the hose, changing out the fasteners, cleaning up the backing plate to get it ready for this. I think that's, that's all just necessary prep work. All right. We are down to the last few pieces. Definitely don't want to get any of that on the water pump, so I'll get that off in a minute. Water pump's impeller is what we're looking at there. All right. Just clean this up here. This is just a rag with a little bit of mineral spirits on it. Okay. Now I'm going to bring this guy over. Just going to kind of just do a little bit of final alignment here, because again, I do not want any leaks, and I don't want any tears on the gasket either. Okay. Then I'm going to take this guy and just double check my alignment. Set this down like this, and I bring this guy down into position on top of it. Okay, like that. And then we're just going to put these other bolts in. Now, I'm not going to just put the bolts in as is. These bolts, as you saw, are on the inside of the engine facing the gear for the injection pump. So that's got the timing gear for the injection pump, and then the timing chains behind it. So I'm definitely going to put a little bit of Loctite, high temperature Loctite on here. Assuming that there's any in this one, I might have to go get another container if there's not. And that might be the case. Let me just hold this right here so it doesn't fall over and see what we got going on here. Might be just an old dried up tube. And it is an old dried up tube. So we are going to have to do things a different way here. I find what I did with that top, and I'm just going to get it out this way. So the reason I'm doing this is not specified in the shop manual, but I'm telling you it's super, super necessary, because you think about it, if any of these bolts were to come off and fall out inside where you're going down the road, game over, right? Game over. Because they're going to fall down into the area where the timing gears are, and they're going to cause all kinds of havoc. So we're putting this material on here to avoid that. And hopefully it'll keep them in place. All right. So I'm going to keep going around like that and hand tightening them. And again, the part number on what I'm using here, this is just another GM material. This is GM High Strength, High Temperature Thread Locker Red. And that's a super small part number that I cannot make out. Looks like maybe 89012, maybe 12297, something like that. I'll get it out and roll it at the bottom just to be sure. All right, so I'm just going to keep going along like that with these bolts. Putting a little bit of this thread locker on them. And you notice I'm not putting it down near the bottom, because I don't want to get a hydrolock situation when I'm screwing these in. I'm just wanting to get a little bit of it along the sides, because it's just trying to get it where it will keep it from working its way out. That's really all we're trying to do. And it's just a little bit more than the factory would have done. Since, as I said, if you look at the shop manual, it doesn't say boo about doing anything like this. All right. So you guys don't necessarily need to watch me do all of these. So I'm just going to kind of do this one here, and then I'm going to tighten some of these in just so you can see that part, and then I'll finish the rest of these other two, and we'll come back. What I'm going to do is I'll finish the rest of these two, and then I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to give it a paint, and then we'll come back when that's done. And I'm putting this back in with a 13 millimeter. So There's no pattern or anything that's specified in the shop manual either, so I'm just going to kind of go down with these very small snugging. Flip over here, do one of these. I'm going to go over and just keep going around like that. Then I'm going to go add the other two, and then I'll torque them around, and then we'll be ready to flip it over and paint it. So I'm going to keep going with this, and we'll come back when I'm at that point. Got this painted the way I wanted. Again, you know, it was just a cosmetic thing. It's not anything fantastic or special or show car worthy. It's just to make it look a little bit nicer when you're under the hood. Now let's go to the next step so we can get this mounted on the engine while this other stuff is still wet and drying. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run an anaerobic sealant around the outside edge of the backing plate here and around these two coolant openings. And that is detailed in the service manual here. And they tell you to use a part 1052357 type of sealer, but that works out to a couple of other off-the-shelf brands, and in this case it works off to this Permatex 51813, which key is it's got to be, absolutely has to be anaerobic. If you don't use anaerobic, it's not going to work. RTV will not work in this particular application. So what we're going to do is we're going to run it around, as you see in the picture, we're going to run it around both of the coolant openings here, and then we're going to run it all the way around. Basically just going nice and slow. You want to just make sure that you get an uninterrupted bead. Right, just like this. Okay, I'm going to go do that on the other side, and I'm going to do it all the way around, and we'll come back. I've got this guy, as you can see, all ready to mount, and I've gone through and done it exactly like the picture in the service manual, and I've made an extra pass by eye to make sure that it looks like I've not had any break in the bead. And then I've got the mating area ready. Now I can't actually scrape this because it's aluminum and I don't want to gouge it, so what I've done is I've lightly scraped it very gently with a plastic scraper, and then I've used some brake cleaner. That's about as far as I guess I can go without damaging it. So I need to get this guy on before he dries so we can start torquing the whole thing down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get him into position, and then I'm going to attach the upper bolts first. Okay. One of these to have it ready. These in here, and these bolts that go in up in the top part here, they don't penetrate into the water jacket or anything like that, so we just screw them straight in like I'm doing. Be sure you remove all the little pieces of paper that you might have had plugging stuff up before you get to this step, of course. This guy right here. Let me go ahead and put these in. Not going to torque them, just going to get them in so that they're helping hold this. Okay, the next two I'm going to put in will be these two up at the top that are going to hold the oil filler pipe. There's one here and one here. I'll torque these up and get everybody in. right, so now I'm going to start putting the bolts that go through to the water jacket area. Now these do need to be sealed. And we'll be using what the shop manual recommends, this GM 12346004. This is a sealant with a Teflon coating on it. And I'm just going to get my bolts into position to put them back in the order we took them out. And I cleaned these guys up, but I didn't try to remove all of the old sealant. I just tried to remove, you know, what looked like it was bad. There was no reason to try to take it all off. And now I'm just going to put some new on here. I decided, you know, none of these bolts in the end, after I got them cleaned up, I just cleaned them up with a wire brush, a hand wire brush, you know, like you get from Harbor Freight. Looks like a toothbrush, and they cleaned up very nicely. So I decided that they were all serviceable. And this one here, like in particular, you can see, you know, it's still got the black oxide coating. It's in good shape. So this guy goes right here. Thread him in by hand. It's always a good sign when you can get these guys to go in by hand. These are 15s. Tighten them up in a minute. This next guy I've got, let's see. This guy goes on the left side. This is the one that, you know, was in the worst shape, actually. If you think back to the earlier video, this guy was in the worst shape. But clean up with a wire brush, and he's in good. He's really not that bad. Now, this was one of the ones I think that was actually a source of some of the leak, because it had none of this coating left on it at all. But it was just some surface corrosion. Nothing to worry about. Just threading in by hand as well. And again, it's always a good sign when you can thread them in by hand. This guy is on the bottom left. Right, so I'm just going to keep going around doing these. Actually, let me just finish this one. I want to remind you about the two on the bottom. Just want a nice, good seal so that coolant can't weep its way back up through these threads. Right, and then we've got this guy that goes over here on the right. Again, he was in good shape too. Of all of them, he was the only one that had like a slightly different color sealant. It was like a red. Different supplier, I guess. Because I have never serviced this water pump. Just keep the reassembly going. I'm going to reattach the oil filler pipe now. Kind of wiggle him in there. Just going to start this. I'm going to get myself, I got a little rubber mallet here to help finish getting that in. Okay. We can tighten these guys up. This guy. Now, I didn't show it earlier, but, you know, just to remind you guys, I did torque everything up to 31 foot-pounds. That's what it said in the service manual. However, I did not torque up those two little 10 millimeter ones on the bottom to that same amount. Just seems really high for those. So I'll tell you what I'm going to end up torquing them to. I'm going to think about it a little bit, but I just can't see a 31 foot-pound in such a small bolt compared to these big heavy ones. All right, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our bypass back on. So we got a new one of those that goes here. And this is GM 102 43629. All right, so that's a brand new one of those. And we're going to replace it with some new GM spring clamps. And that's, find one where we got the writing not messed up. 11570388. Like I was saying earlier, that you just really can't reuse these guys. After so many years, they lose their tension. So this guy's going to go in with the bend up towards the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the clamps on beforehand. Put these clips on before I mount it. Move them back into position later. On the bottom here. And now get it on the top. Oops, I'm going to make sure I took that paper towel out. Yep, okay. All right, he's in position. Now, I'm just going to move these clamps back closer to where they need to go. It's a little bit more. Problem is they get kinked on these bends. Alright, that one seems good. This guy here, just want to get him a little bit away from the pulley. Just to be safe. Okay, that's a good position for him, and then I just want to try and get him to go down a little bit. One of these days I'm going to get one of those special tools that you use for this stuff. A lot easier than just using a pair of pliers. This one's also going to be extra hard because there's like a GM label on the back here. Let me get my screwdriver. Right, I finally got it where I wanted it, which is down here below the nipple, and then I moved it down because I don't want it to be anywhere near. It might get, you know, near the serpentine belt. All right, so the next guy to go in is going to be the new lower belt. That's going to be the lower hose. Before I do that, I'm going to put a new fastener on this guy. I took the old one off already, and that's a 115-706-16. So I'm just going to pre-install this guy. It's a little bit different design than the other one. So I have the kind of lock beforehand. These are always like hard to do at the beginning because when you used hose like this, it's kind of swelled up a little bit. All right, we got it on the hose itself. Now we want to get it back further. Okay, so that one's in position. Now let's get our new lower hose. Here's our new lower hose. This is an AC Delco 26264X, and it's a GM 8890-8961. All right, so there's a couple of clips for this. And goes on either end, and these are 123-38017s. And the dealer, if you try to order something like this, you'll have to buy like 5. But fortunately, I got it from somebody who was just selling individuals. So these are like a stainless steel with a black anodized coating on them. All right, so we're going to end up putting one over here, and we're going to put it where the screws face up in this direction, like this. And then we're going to put one over here, same way. And in fact, because we have so little room on this side, I'm going to go ahead and try to pre-tighten this one a little bit, just so he doesn't kind of wobble around on us. And then we'll slide him into position. And as soon as we get the piece on the radiator in place, I'll go ahead and put the surge tank piece in place. And then we'll mount it to the water pump. And at that point, we're done with the cooling system pieces. We'll be ready, the fan, and we will be ready. Actually, this guy's going to walk on me too, so let me just give him a little bit of tightening as well, just before I get started here. I'm not going to put any kind of lubricant or anything on here. Being all new parts, it should all slide together real easy. I don't think there would be a problem getting on the radiator end because the old hose came right off of that. The reason it was hard to get off the pump was all that corrosion. And we won't be dealing with that this time. Alright, so this should keep him right around here so he doesn't go traveling down to where I might have difficulty getting him. Alright. Over on this side. Thanks, so there's that. And actually, now that I think about it, I'm just going to go ahead and put this one on here. I'm going to run it all up the machined piece, right up to the rough casting. Take a moment to do that, but it'll eventually go. Alright, and then we'll get this guy on here. Alright, there's that one. We'll put our spring clamp into position near the base. These things are a pain in the ass. There we go. Alright. And this guy, I feel is in all the way, but I'm going to probably get a flashlight down here just to make sure. And if he is, I'll tighten him up. I'm going to tighten him up with the screw in that position facing up so I can come straight down from this side if I ever need to. And then this guy, I need to loosen up a little bit because he's kinking. Put him on too tight to begin with. And then we'll push him up into place and we'll tighten him up as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and we'll come back when everything's in position. Guys, just want to kind of recap here, right? So we got this guy tightened up. We got this spring clamp in position here. We got this spring clamp in position here. Just want to remind you this had to come all the way up to this little cast-in notch here. If it's an older design that doesn't have the cast-in notch, it's got to at least come up to the casting area. The other thing we've done is I went ahead and put the accessory bracket on, and I'm going to go ahead and put the alternator back in. And I got these clamps exactly where I wanted them. I kind of moved them over a little bit more, just worried about them hitting the serpentine belt. And I've got our compressor, AC compressor, retorqued down, 37 foot-pounds. I've put the bolt that holds these lines here, and then I've put this piece back on with the nut that holds this. And again, we've got the 4 bolts, 2 bolts rather, in the nut. Remember, there's 1 bolt behind this idler pulley it holds this accessory bracket on. So I'm going to put the alternator on, I'm going to hook it up, I'm going to hook the batteries back up, and I'm going to put the Serpentine belt on, and we'll come back. Here's as far as I got before I got rained out yesterday, just wrapping it up this morning. Got the Serpentine belt all in, got the alternator in, got the 2 bolts here, torqued down to 37 foot-pounds, reconnected the connections in the back. I'll roll at the bottom the torque value for that nut that goes to the back of the alternator. Got the battery hooked up, got the vacuum pump back installed. And just to give you an idea what you would do, this is what you would do with one of these devices. This one's from Harbor Freight that puts the pulley back on. Normally, you just throw one of the appropriate shaft that threads into what you're trying to put the pulley on with a thrust washer and this bearing. But what I found was it wasn't enough length for me. So I ended up having to stack a bunch of these washers on here, and that's what did it for me. Something like this would just thread into the nose of the pump like this. And after you thread it in, you get a couple of crescent wrenches, and you hold one on this end, and then this one's the one you're going to turn, and it just slowly pushes the pulley back on. So at some point near the end, I started to turn the whole shaft as it got tight, and I took a punch, or you see my finger going through, and I stuck it through this hole in the pulley and wedged it into this web for one of the bolts so that I could keep the pulley from moving, and that allowed me to finish it the rest of the way. So what you're looking for here, the factory one's got this shield here, and then you can see the pulley above on the alternator, and you can see the pulley here for the tensioner. And you're just looking to see that these guys are in alignment. If it's in alignment by eye with these outer flanges, it's close enough. There's not anything exact here, and there's not any kind of specific kind of torque or anything like that. It's just until you can see it. Now what I also did is I pick that up later. I also took note of the rust line here and made sure that I only get it to the same point. So once I saw that I was clearing the nice unrusted area, I knew to stop right where the rust was. The other thing I've done this morning is I've put some new coolant in. This is what I use, Prestone 5050 Dex Cool. This is the same stuff that was in there before. I'm not a believer in changing the stuff out to green. That's not what the factory used, so I don't ever use that. I think it's a myth that this causes damage. Really, the only thing that ever bothers it is this cast zinc kind of material for this coupler. It doesn't do anything to the rest of it, or they wouldn't have used it for so many years at General Motors. But I drained probably anywhere from 12 to 13 quarts, and I probably lost 1 to 2 to piss off Captain Planet. But the rest of it, I was able to top off exactly what I took off. And what I do is I try to put a light near the back here on the surge tank. And this is really the only way you can tell. You can see it kind of turns reddish pink, and you can see when you get up to this ridge, which is the fill line. And I'll run it and suck some of that out, and you'll have to keep topping it off. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the fan on and the upper shroud and reclamp down our battery, and we'll be at a point where we can start it up and start bleeding it out. So I'll come back after that. At the end here, we've got the fan shroud back on. I'll roll the torque values down at the bottom. I'm going to go around and torque this. We've got our battery line clipped back up. Don't forget to do your axle vent over here on the side. Don't forget to hook up both the clutch and the 2 pressure switch connections on the back of the AC compressor. Again, reminder on the back of the alternator, there's 2 connections there as well. Of course, the batteries. Put your bulb back in your hood lamp when you're done with all this. I've let it sit with having added that antifreeze and haven't seen any static leaks. That's why I went ahead and put everything back. I've started it up, and I don't see any immediate leaks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it for a run to get it hot enough to open up the thermostat, so we can drain some of this fluid out of the surge tank and get the air out of it. Probably have to do a couple of sessions where you keep topping it back off to the cold line after letting it sit. But we're done, and I'm hoping this fixes my problem, and I hope it helps you. If you got questions, leave comments down at the bottom. I'll try to help. Otherwise, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.